I don't want to speak ahead of myself, but having Hardline the weekend before Leogang and then seeing Jackson get hurt, it's going to be, well, we'll see who shows up to race Hardline. But that'll be a tough one to make that call. I'm sure Ronan will be there regardless to take the series, and he clearly doesn't, not afraid of anything.
But it is a question, isn't
Yeah,
it? It's something that does come into play because when you have a World Cup series, and we see it in all sports, don't we? There's other competing events throughout the series or throughout the year where there might be good prize money on the line. And I think that you mentioned it earlier, Sven, with the US Open. That's an event that's outside of the norm, but is generally seen as a huge positive. You can go out there early, you can get acclimatized, you can get a race under your belt in North America and then go on. But potentially Hardline is almost seen in the other light because it's big risk. We've seen a lot of big injuries that have come from that event. And with someone like Red Bull behind it, we want to see the races there. I think that having the top end races there, as opposed to a really mixed field of different riders of different abilities and different skill sets, it makes the event a slightly different vibe. And I don't think you're likely to see as many of the top contenders, if they've had a good season, want to line up at Hardline just for that fear of the potential injury. And that is a shame. That is a shame because they make it look so good. And maybe if someone's had an injury and they're out for the series overall or the overall title, maybe that's when they'll jump in and go, well, it doesn't really matter. Let's see how we get on.
there is also, I might walk back a bit of my statement because even the guy who got hurt most, Jackson Goldstone, who is affecting this year's season, he doesn't have any regrets being at Hardline, and he says like literally they're at the time of the year where he could literally clip his pedal on his enduro bike on the local trails at home and come off with the same injury. So it is obviously he's raising the pace of his run, and he did get a bit wild on a track, but he needs to be doing that anyway before the World Cup season. So that they understand the risk, and to the top guys, even the hardline whales, although there are going to be some massive changes, I hear, which will make it exciting. But I don't think they're as fussed as I am for them doing it, or as maybe as their team managers for them to do it. To them, it's just another race, and it's kind of the features that they're seeing on Hardline. They would rather see a lot of those features at full size or almost full size on World Cup tracks because that is the level of riding and racing that they can deal with.
Well, Alan, you're in
Yeah,
more of this
true.
position now, performance manager, coach at Norco with Craig, and I ran into this problem when I was back on a team, and I won't even name teams because I understand where it comes from, and you'll get the context. If you think about protecting your investment, so you've hired someone for a World Cup season, and maybe there's some Crankworks ones, which are downhill races. That's within reason what you do as a profession. And I wanted to go to a street race. There was a week off. Looked like a fun street race in Bratislava. Yeah, so in Slovakia. Yeah, I was in Slovakia, right? And I looked at the track, looked at the GoPro. I was like, it didn't seem as gnarly as some of these South American ones, and I wanted to go. And dude, it was met with so much
Yeah.
negative feedback from the team because they're paying me to be at the World Cups, and also like all the infrastructure's there, the mechanics, all these things. So now I'm going against their wishes. And if I had got hurt, there would have been, I told you so. So it was a real tough thing. So you can see these teams, maybe, I'm not saying they will do it, but maybe someone like Cube saying, can we have a conversation? What are we focusing on? What's your goal here? Yes, you could do very well at Hardline. We could get some publicity. But the worst case scenario of that is you miss 4 rounds of the World Cup. We've got the truck there. We've done this whole
Yeah.
investment in you. We've done preseason testing. So that's like the return on investment for some riders is not maybe as much. Someone like Dunn, you go, he's got a good chance of winning this thing. Bernard Kerr, well, he owns his own team and Pivot loves it. So it's kind of a case by case, isn't it? And weighing up the worst case scenario, I think.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think ultimately you're looking at the big picture and saying, is this going to help overall performance? Now, if you have raced hardline before, if you're comfortable in that environment, if it's not going to necessarily put you out of your comfort zone, then hey, racing's racing. Just as Sven has said with Jackson, you could trip over. I could fall down my front step and, break an ankle. These things happen. To me, it's when you're taking someone out of their normal and you're putting them in an environment that they're not so used to. So some boys will ride their motocross bikes during the season. Now, if that's what you're used to doing, then fantastic. But if you're just going to go on a ride day at Dorno because it's on the way back from a race and you're going to jump on a bike, I think that's where the injury risk obviously rockets. And it's worth mentioning this. A couple of years ago, Andy Kolb went to Hardline, rode the practice, and was just, I'm not going to race this. I'm not comfortable. I don't feel as though I've got in the groove, and I'm not comfortable on these jumps. And that's not to say Colby wouldn't be absolutely fine, but that just goes to show that he'd made that decision. He'd looked at it and gone, you know what, in the grand scheme of things, I'm outside of what I'm used to doing here. And because everyone else was so comfortable on those jumps, they're fine. But if it's a new time at a new track, then that's where the risk comes. And I completely can understand that there's this conflict, because at what point do you say, well, I'll wrap you up in cotton wool, don't do anything? And then ultimately your performance is going to be poor because you're not pushing the envelope. You're not getting comfortable at speed. So it's, I would say, case by case. And I would say you've got to decide, are they comfortable in those environments? Someone like Ronan, he's a lunatic. The boy's a lunatic. You see some of the stuff he puts up and he enjoys living on that edge and getting loose. And in a way, you're buying into that, aren't you? And if he crashes, he crashes. It's one of those things, but he's used to those environments. But I'd be mindful, and I can't imagine that some of the more, I don't want to use the word discipline, but riders who are just focused on World Cup racing, I don't necessarily think you'll see them turn up at these events as easily.
Andrew, to comment on your previous team manager, I 100% would agree with him. Street racing you show me one street race that does not look sketchy as all hell. If it's not a dog on the course, it's a flat landing and narrow stairs with your bars need to be trimmed. No. Street racing, that can be done like January, February, and then it's cut. Right. Like,
it was a chilled one. I got on the podium. It's fine. All
you got some spending. You got some spending money. So you got. Yeah. Well, there's another motivation coming from South Africa or South America. You race for those dollars. That's for sure.